At my home, in my closet, I got a picture of Vivien Leigh and Clark Gable, and I've got so many videos, tapes, CDs, DVDs of Gone with the Wind. You know, it was Scarlett O'Hara, who was played by Vivien Leigh, who is that woman who knows how to deal with a nation at war. Atlanta is burning. The Union Army is carrying off everything from her beloved, even her home terror. The carpetbaggers who arrive after the war. Scarlett is beautiful. She is a gorgeous young lady. She has much vitality, and she's not in love with Rhett. She's in love with Ashley. Have you ever known a woman who was in love with the wrong man? She's in love with Ashley. Ashley is the man she had wanted for so long, and he's getting ready to marry her cousin, Melanie. And you know, there's Mammy in the movie, and Mammy warns Scarlett to behave herself at the party at 12 Oaks. There is a new man there that day, the day the Civil War begins, and his name is Rhett Butler, played by Clark Gable. Scarlett does not know he is in the room, and she pleads with Ashley to choose her instead of his cousin, Melanie. Rhett finally gets mad at Scarlett as the movie goes forward, and there is a certain tagline to the story. Rhett finally gets tired of begging Scarlett to be with him. And so the story goes that she stands at the top of a staircase, and Rhett turns around and says to Scarlett, "You know, I'm leaving, Scarlett. I'm tired of you. I tried to love you and give you everything that I could, but no, you would not accept it. You wanted the other fella, but I'm leaving out here. I'm leaving." Y'all remember what Scarlett O'Hara said? She said, "Oh, Rhett, please don't go. I've loved you. I've always loved you. I'll do better." Rhett looks up at her. Clark Gable looks up at her on the top of the staircase, and he says, "Frankly, darling, I don't give a darn." Y'all thought I was going to say the wrong word, didn't you? But then it is Scarlett O'Hara who makes this dynamic statement afterward. She says, "Well, go ahead on, Rhett. Leave on out of the door. It's all right." She says, "Because tomorrow, I wish somebody could get this. Tomorrow is another day." I don't know about you, but I'm sure about tomorrow is another day. And I believe that tomorrow is going to be better than my yesterdays. Is there anybody here in the house who've had a rough 2018? You've had some rough time. You had some losses. You had some funeral services that you had to go to. Things were not as good as they should have been, and it was rough in 2018. But I stopped by to tell you that a transition from an old year to a new year says that there are new opportunities, and there's some things you can put behind you and move on. It was Paul who said, "I press towards the mark of the high calling," which means I've got to let some stuff go of the past and move on into a brand new future. Is there anybody in the house here want to move on to a brand new future? Life can be better. Life can be brighter. Life can be happier. Life can be joyful. Life can be much more successful and victorious in the new year. Turn to your neighbor and say, "Neighbor, it's a new year coming in." And if you don't have anything to thank God for, you ought to thank God that your number is not on your tombstone. I called it tombstone, didn't I? Your gravestone, you don't have that number. Began at such a time, died 2018. You ought to shout. If you didn't get sick this year, you ought to be shouting. If you didn't have any surgery this year, You didn't have to go to the doctor and have a stayover for 3 or 5 days. You ought to be praising God. If you never was really sick this year, you ought to be thanking God you were not sick like that this year. You ought to give God some praise. If you're still in your right mind and you didn't go crazy with all the stuff and foolishness in this country and nation, you ought to thank God like never before. 2018 passed. Now I can move on into a new year. Can you shout Happy New Year? Sit down. Let me just give you a couple things here and call it a day here. You can move into the new year if you remember 2 words. The 2 words are expectation and determination. You generally get what you expect. If you don't expect nothing, you don't get nothing. Have I got a witness? If you don't think nothing gonna happen next year, ain't nothing gonna happen in your life. But if you made a shift in your life, I wish I could preach this thing. If you made a shift in your life and you're saying to yourself, I don't know what is going to happen on tomorrow, but at the end of the day, I'm expecting God to do something that he's never done before in my life. I'm expecting God to walk with me like never before. I'm expecting God to move in my life. I'm expecting God to do some great things in my life. I may not have had a good job this year, but next year I'm expecting somebody to call me and tell me they want me to work for them. I'm expecting. If you don't expect now, you see, that's the problem with church on Sunday morning. We cannot have worship service because folk come to church on Sunday morning and they don't expect God to do nothing. And so sometimes we just sit like a lump on a log. But when you get up on Sunday morning and you start to praising God and believing that God is going to move at Mount Zion or the church you're from, if you start to believe that the choir is going to sing like never before, that the moment that you hit the driveway, the cement of the church, the parkway, the moment that you hit all of it, that something is going, if you expect something to happen, something happens. And then when you come to church and if it starts to happen and you're sitting next to somebody who ain't expecting anything to happen, you need to learn how to get up out of your seat, throw up your finger, and move to one of those hot spots inside of the church. Have you ever came to church and you were really ready to worship God and all of a sudden you look next to the person next to you and they got their hands all folded like, ain't nothing gonna happen, move me. And what is he gonna say to me and how he's gonna make me happy today? Listen, God couldn't move you all week long. What do you think the preacher is able to do on Sunday morning? You sitting up there singing when you walk in the door, I shall not be moved. I'm like a tree planted by the rivers of water. I shall not be moved. You need to find yourself the hot spots in the church. Somebody who knows what it means to be hit from the top of the head by the Holy Spirit to go down to the soles of their feet. You've got to find that person who don't mind lifting up their holy hands unto the Lord. You need to find that spot where somebody is shouting for God, because I stopped by to tell you that which comes from the heart goes to the heart, and shouting and praising is contagious. But you got to get around contagious folk. Folk don't mind to say, I'm thankful to God that I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on Jesus. I'm so glad that the death angel didn't come by my house and visit my house. You know, so often I go to bed at nighttime and I'm sitting there trying to go to sleep. And I say, oh my gosh, I know somebody gonna call me. And if they call me at 2 o'clock, I know somebody done died. Because if they ain't done died, when I see them the next morning, they gonna die. I know that's right. Expectation, say expectation. And determination. You've got to be determined. The Christian life becomes ineffective without these 2 things. You've got to be determined when faced with life challenges and have the spirit of expectation when trying to overcome certain kinds of challenges. That was the attitude of a young painter that I saw some time ago on the Discovery Channel. It was another painter who had this thing called determination and expectancy. One of the greatest goals in his life was to paint. Say paint. He could not paint because he was born with no hands and no arms. But one day he said to himself, with the help of God and my earnest determination and expectation, God will help me. I'll learn how to paint. And I said to myself, as he was sitting there talking and having this kind of conversation, I said to myself, how in the world is a man going to learn how to paint who does not have any hands and any arms? But one day, as painful as it was, he said, he picked up a brush with his toes and began painting what eventually became what I called a Picasso. The boy shouted after he finished painting the picture, God is able. After looking at the finished product, his name was Robert Banaski, I found out later. I don't know about you, but I know that God is able. If I stay determined, God is able. If I expect God to do what no other power can do, God is able. In fact, God can do the impossible. God is able to do abundantly above all that we ask or think. He can do what we call the supernatural. Say supernatural. If we have the spirit of expectancy and determination. When you expect great things from God, here is the saying: God does great things for you. And this was the attitude of Paul in the book of Philippians, the first chapter, the 20th verse. He says, my earnest expectation. Here's what the text says. It says, according to my earnest expectation and my hope that in nothing I shall be ashamed, but with all boldness, as always, so now also Christ shall be magnified in my body, whether by life or death. Whatever you do, you got to hold on to that word, expectation. My earnest expectation. Say expectation. What does it mean in the original Greek, in the original language, in the original tongue of Greek? It's a tongue twister. I wish I could preach this thing. The word is apo, say apo, kata, dokia. Apo, kata, dokia, which means expectation. What does it mean? Apo means you got to lift your head and straighten yourself out. When you're really expecting something, you don't hold your head down. You hold your head up and you're looking for something to happen. Kata means to stretch out the neck. It means stretch out the neck as if you're running after something. You see, you've got to believe in what you're running after, and then you've got to stretch out your head, and you've got to stretch out your neck, and you've got to lift up your head. And dokia means strain the eyes, which means looking forward. Whatever's going to happen next year, it becomes victory and success when you are stretching yourself out and you're looking like a runner and you're getting ready to go after it and you're ready to run for it. That is what expectation is all about. It's about straining after. That's why Paul said, I press, I see the mark and I'm pressing, I'm pushing, I'm going forward. I got my eyes on the goal that is set behind. The problem is, say the problem is, too many of us, instead of expecting, watch this, we are busy inspecting. You see, God can't do anything for you when you're always inspecting. You know, he said, bring you all the tithe into the store, all tithe and offering into the storehouse, that there may be meat in my house, you know. And then the first thing we started doing, instead of expecting God to take that seed and multiply it, we are inspecting God. So we start talking about how can God take 10% and turn it into more than the 100%. I wish I had time to preach it. We are inspecting instead of expecting what God says and what God does. We had an old saying that said this: if God said it, I believe it. I'm not going to inspect it, but that settles it. Paul says, my earnest expectation. There's a saying that comes from the word of the whole old hymnologist who said, the Lord will make a way somehow. I wish I had some more somehow people in the church. Somehow he made a way out of no way. Somehow he fed me when I was hungry. Somehow he walked with me when I was all by myself. Somehow he regulated my mind. Somehow he fixed my heart. Somehow he made my enemies my footstool. Somehow he lifted me up and turned me around. Somehow he made a way out of no way. Somehow he became, I wish I had some somehow folk in the house. Somehow when I was going to the doctor, he became a doctor in a sick room. Somehow when I was going on a court case, he became a lawyer in a courtroom. Somehow he made my friend, my enemies, my footstool. Somehow I made it this year. I didn't think I was going to make it like I did. I didn't think I was going to be a picture of health at the end of the year. The doctor told me my cholesterol was high. The doctor told me my blood pressure was high. The doctor told me my heart was all messed up. The doctor told me I had a diseased body. But look at me now. I'm standing in spite of the disease in my body. Is there any somehow folk in the house? I didn't know how I was going to pay that mortgage note this year, but somehow I didn't know how to pay the rent, but somehow my child became wayward, but somehow the Lord turned my child back around. I didn't know how I was going to see, but somehow, are there any somehow folk in the house? At the end of 2018, can you say somehow he walked with me? Somehow he talked with me. Somehow he made me run when I couldn't run on, but I ran on anyhow. At the end of the year, somehow, I'm a somehow person. I'm a somehow person. Somehow, next year, the same God who brought me from a mighty long ways, somehow, I believe, I expect God to do some greater blessings in the year to come. Somehow, in the midst of what the nation faces, somehow God is going to intervene, shut the government down, but somehow God sits on his holy throne. He's looking down, judging there. Somehow, oh, come on, stand on your feet. Somehow, you gonna make it. Don't ask me how. Don't ask me when and where. Don't inspect what I'm saying. You expect God. Somehow. Can I tell you something? When I give my tithe and offering, I don't second guess. God, is he going to give me more than I gave to him? I told church the other day, I had a very nice cashmere coat that I was very proud of. And I kept thinking about people who needed a coat. I pressed the coat, I cleaned the coat, and I gave the coat away. I ain't even had another one. I'm not like some of y'all. Y'all got more coats than you have closets. And when I gave the coat away, I expected God to give me a better and another coat. I went to a certain store and I looked into my size. It wasn't there. I went into one of y'all sizes, a little larger, and tucked in there was only one coat that actually fit my size. I told Marilyn, I said, Marilyn, go buy that coat. I said, because I expected God to give me another coat. When God does something and he said he would do something, I expect him. It doesn't surprise me. I'm like the centurion brother who had a servant who was sick, and he went to Jesus and said, Jesus, I expect you to heal my servant. He said, in fact, Jesus, you don't even have to come to my house, because I understand how soldiers work. When they give an order, the order is always follow through. So if you just give an order, my servant will be healed. Jesus said, I haven't seen such a faith like this. Go your way. The healing has already happened. There was a woman with 12 issues of blood for 12 years. She said, I heard that Jesus is passing through, and I'm determined to see him and to touch the hem of his garment, and I expect healing will come from the garment itself. Jesus passed through and she touched the hem of his garment, and Jesus said, hey, who touched me? The disciples said, there's hundreds of people around here. He said, no, there is a certain kind of touch that has come from my garments. Somebody has touched the hem of my garment, and I don't know who it was. The lady said, it was me. The Bible says that she was healed the moment she touched the hem of his garment, because she believed that God was going to heal. I expect things to happen in this church. I expect things to happen in this nation next year. I expect God to turn things around. And I'm determined to do all I can to cooperate with God. Come on, give God some praise in the house. As we bow our heads, we're ready to go. God, we just thank you again tonight. We have this spirit of expectation and determination. And we're believing that when we follow your will and your way, that Christ will be magnified in our body. And even in the midst of life and death, we're going to be determined and stubbornly determined in the midst of life and death. We're going to be too crazy to become discouraged. We're going to be too confident to consider even death stopping our praise. We're going to be determined to worship you every Sunday and every day that we wake up. And we believe that when the praises shall go up, the blessings will come down. Thank you, God. Give God some praise right there. Turn to your neighbor and say, neighbor, it's almost a new year. Say, neighbor, what are you expecting God to do in the new year? Just bow your heads and think about what is it that you want from God. God said you came to church, you worshiped him, you gave him your all, you stretched, you straightened up your head and your neck, and your eyes went forward and said, I'm going to church tonight because I want God to do something different in my life in 2019. God just told me somebody's going to be healed next year. God just told me somebody's marriage is going to be straightened out. God just told me someone's finances are going to be much more friendlier in the new year. What are you expecting? What are you determined to do to get that? Tell him right now. Tell him right now.